A guy walks into a group therapy meeting and he says, "Hello, I'm Steve, and I've been sober for 6 months." And the chairperson says, "Well, hello, Steve, but I'm afraid this is not actually AA. This is a group for compulsive liars." And Steve says, "Thank fuck for that, because I'm hammered." Brothers, sisters, comrades and friends, welcome to Bad Country. So I'm not going to bury the lead here. How long does it take before a recovering alcoholic begins to feel normal again? Well, for me, it was about a year before I started feeling like I was getting better, and then 18 months before I started feeling anything like good. But recovery from any kind of addiction is never a straight line. There are a lot of variables. And everything I'm about to say assumes that you've done no damage to your body that is irreversible, which oftentimes is the case. Alcoholism can lead to a number of health complications, which mean, sadly, you may never feel good again. I'm incredibly lucky to have dodged so many bullets given the nature and the volume of my drinking. I don't take it for granted. But if you are lucky enough to have dodged the worst of the consequences, how long does it take before you start feeling good again? Well, it depends on a ton of different things. It depends a lot on your age and your health, a little bit of genetics and medical history, as well as how much you were drinking and for how long. Those last two are the primary considerations for your prognosis of the future. How much were you drinking and for how long? Those will decide what your future looks like. And then there are quite a lot of external factors as well, which might be beyond your control. For example, having a good support network, or the state of your finances. What kind of access to healthcare do you have? Are your family still in your life? All of these things can ease or complicate your journey back to full recovery. When it comes to the timeline of recovery, of feeling good again, there is no magic number, but there are some patterns. For the following information, I'll be speaking from my own experience. So if you are a drinker like I was, which is to say, a suicidal, chronic, binge-drinking alcoholic, a real low-bottom alcoholic who went through delirium tremens several times, then you'll know roughly what to expect and how long it will take. But I'll also include some kind of anecdotal information from other kinds of drinkers, like more moderate alcoholics as well. Just so if your drinking is not as destructive as mine was, you should also have an impression of what you can expect, what kind of milestones to anticipate. And at this early point in the video, as I endeavour to take Bad Country, the YouTube channel, more and more seriously, it's worth mentioning that, first of all, you should like and subscribe if you think that this information has value for you, but also that there is now a Patreon available. Just for those of you, the few amongst you who want to support the channel more actively and have some access to some more kind of personal and intimate content from behind the scenes that won't make it to the YouTube channel, and have a kind of more direct access to discuss things with me, that's where you can do that. That's what that's for. But a larger YouTuber recently told me in conversation that the more people who support the channel, the more I can do the channel. And that's what it comes down to. So there's a link to that in the description. There's also a video that I posted there to explain in more detail why I've chosen to do that. So check it out if you're curious. Anyway, okay. So there are a number of different kind of early and longer term sobriety thresholds that you'll encounter, at which point you will start to feel better about your situation. And the problem is, though, that quite a lot of those thresholds, those passing feelings that things are going to be okay, are frankly, in my experience, false horizons. They proved to not be permanent. And I say that not to dissuade anybody in early sobriety or to discourage anyone, but I find the path of sobriety is much simpler when you know where the bends are, you know where the obstacles are. So this is, I share this just to arm you with the information you need so that there are no surprises. I'm sorry if it's a bit of a bummer. For example of one of those false horizons, though, in very early sobriety, is that once the initial feelings of hangover, if you're a moderate drinker, or withdrawal if you're a heavier drinker like I was, once they begin to fade, you will feel better, just naturally, because not having a hangover feels better than a hangover, right? But that's a false horizon, because after the immediate alcohol has left your body, and you start to recover from the effects of being essentially poisoned, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're better for the long term. Just because you're no longer throwing up over the side of the bed doesn't mean all your alcohol problems are fixed. There's a misnomer in sobriety that once you put the bottle down, everything else falls into place, just automatically. And it's not quite the case. Putting the bottle down is by far the most important step. But it's only the first step. In fact, I would argue, as AA does, we have some synergy here, that the first step is acknowledging that you need to put the bottle down in the first place. And to take myself as an example, I've experienced that false horizon of early detox many, many times. And they manifest differently. So I went through detoxes, like cold turkey detoxes at home. I put down my last drink and found myself feeling great about the future really quickly after that, only to go on and relapse again. So sometimes I will quit drinking and I feel really good about things. However, sometimes I'll do a long stint in a detox clinic or something and walk out and immediately walk to the liquor store and be drunk again before I get home. In Berlin, I was on a terrible psych ward for 6 days. I was supposed to remain there for 30, but after the first week, I discharged myself, hated it there, and I walked out across the road to a liquor store. And within a week, I was back in that same terrible psych ward, seeking treatment again. So the stopping drinking thing, it doesn't automatically mean you're getting better straight away. It's a very good sign. You should be proud of yourself for doing it, but also brace yourself, because there's more to come. And just to digress for a moment, I had a really interesting conversation with a younger, sober person over on my Instagram the other day. And they made a really interesting point about detox clinics and psych wards. Because I have this very weird thing, even in long-term sobriety, I have this kind of pang of missing the psych ward, even though it was a terrible and traumatic experience. A little bit of me misses it sometimes. And I was speaking to this sober guy about that. And he pointed out that he misses it too. And that part of it is because alcoholics like me, like us, some of us, we want to be cared for, you know? We want to be nursed and kind of fussed over. And we deliberately drink ourselves stupid. We drink ourselves out of our brains so that we will be consigned to a psych ward where we can be cared for and kind of nursed. And I think that's true of me. I think that explains why I went back so many times. It's because I didn't really... I was trying to get sober, but also there's a large part of me that just wanted to be cared for. That's a slightly gross admission. It's kind of pathetic, but, you know, it's what alcoholics are like. The point is, the very first early stages of sobriety, of the detox period, can depend not just on your physiological characteristics, like how healthy you are. It can also depend on where your head's at when you dip into sobriety. Once the alcohol clears, what's your mental state? And for me, the final relapse that I had, the one that got me to where I am now, the one that got me into long-term sobriety, it wasn't particularly dramatic or special. In fact, I came out of it not particularly enthusiastic about sobriety. I didn't come out of that relapse with any kind of renewed dedication to sobriety. It just kind of coagulated over time and then stuck. And I'm glad to say continues to stick. Touch wood. Because I'd had previous relapses where I did emerge very, very energized and passionate about sobriety, and then relapsed anyway. So there's no silver bullet for this stuff. It is more of a process of the grind of day-to-day sobriety, grinding out sobriety one day at a time. And then eventually, you'll realize that you are no longer grinding, that it's starting to become kind of natural. You don't have to work so hard at it anymore. It's just a part of you. And for me, jumping ahead, I didn't notice when I crossed that threshold. I can only see it kind of in retrospect. And it was about the 1 year mark was when I began to not have to fight minute to minute to be sober anymore. Somewhere around there. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you're a moderate drinker, or you're quite young and healthy, god damn you, then you will experience anxiety and sweating and shaking and nausea and insomnia. And that will begin about 6 hours after your last drink, 6 to 12 hours. But if you have a good night's sleep or two, those effects will largely fade away and you'll already start to feel better, feel normal again. But for harder drinkers, for heavier drinkers, you'll probably be experiencing withdrawal rather than a hangover or even a severe hangover. And if it's really bad, like mine were, then you can expect it to peak at around 72 hours, like 3 days after your last drink. And if you're unlucky enough to get the worst of it, which is delirium tremens, without medical treatment, that can last about 10 days. It'll be 10 days before you return to normal. With medical intervention, it's probably going to be about 5 days before you're capable again. But my experience with it, having been through DTs several times, will have bad news. If it gets that bad for you as it did for me, there is a part of you that will never be normal again. And I feel like I need to explain that very briefly, especially for people who don't understand what DTs are. DTs are not shakes and trembles and stuff. It's a complete detachment from reality. It's a kind of psychosis, a delirium, with incredibly convincing and powerful and vivid hallucinations. And they're terrifying. Terrifying. DTs, fear is baked into delirium tremens. It's not a separate thing. You don't experience fear as a result of the hallucinations that you're feeling. The fear comes first. That's very, very unusual. As a result of the things that I saw and the experiences I had with DTs, I'm unsure if I will ever fully trust reality, fully trust my perception ever again. And sometimes I have to literally check in with myself to make sure things are real. So, delirium tremens, it's not like a bad drug trip. And it's not like dreaming or a nightmare. Or it's not like a way you imagine an acid trip or anything like that. Delirium tremens is the things that you see and experience. They are real. For as long as the episode lasts, it is real to you. You are experiencing those things as though they are real, and it leaves a real footprint on you. Even though the things you're experiencing are not real, you have fully experienced them as though they are. All of those horrible, violent, gory, sexual, terrifying, horrifying experiences that you had, you experienced them as though they were real. Which means that the trauma responses that your body has to them, those trauma responses are real too. And that trauma doesn't go away just because the hallucinations and the delusions have gone away. That trauma lasts. As far as your memory and your body is concerned, you truly were in mortal danger. You were genuinely about to die. And that lasts, that lingers. So when I say I have to check in with myself to make sure my perception is real sometimes, what I mean is this. So my delirium tremens would often start with very quiet or distant music, which means day to day in real life, when I hear kind of indistinct music, I have to go and investigate it to make sure it's real. Because when I hear it, I get a pang of dread, fear, panic, that I might be about to experience delirium tremens, because that's how it starts. And also, delirium tremens for me started with movements in the periphery of my vision. Crawling, snakes and shadows and stuff like that. So now, in the real world, in sober life, if I catch the movement of a shadow or an animal or something just on the edge of my vision, it's very unsettling, because that's what the beginning of delirium tremens feels like. And I don't know if that feeling is ever going to go away. So when we're talking about how long does it take to get better from alcoholism, there are some experiences in alcoholism from which you will never fully recover. But I'll leave that there, because that's not really what we're talking about in this video. Back to it. Okay, so there's a little bit of starting to feel better in the first couple of days as the actual alcohol leaves your body. And then about 2 weeks later, there'll be another one. The first 2 weeks of detox from alcohol are very, very difficult. Horrible. Never ever wish to repeat it. But after that, you'll begin to normalize again. You'll go back to some kind of normalization. You'll still be having insomnia and mood disturbances like depression or mania sometimes. Heightened mood as well as depressed mood. But your physiological symptoms like blood pressure and your electrolyte levels and your heart rate will start to normalize. The way that translates in real life, the way the physiological symptoms slowing down and normalizing, what it means for you is that panicky feeling of early sobriety will subside. It'll bed down into kind of background anxiety for a while, and then that will slowly subside too. But you'll feel less panicky, and you'll stop having palpitations. You'll stop being convinced that you're about to die. And I don't say that flippantly. That is a real thing. In the first couple of weeks of sobriety, you might often feel like death is imminent. You're about to just collapse and die. Don't judge yourself for feeling like that. That's really common. The feeling of impending death is a genuine symptom of this period. And after those first 2 weeks, the immediate urge to drink will also subside, just slightly for a while. The edge will be taken off that. And while I'm thinking about that, it's worth noting that I no longer have urges to drink at all anymore. But I do still occasionally have invasive thoughts about drinking. And we can argue about whether urges and invasive thoughts just amount to the same thing, so we may as well just call them urges. I don't think they are, because an urge is like a physical compulsion to go and drink. And I don't have that ever anymore. And the invasive thoughts are very easy to kind of laugh at, just laugh them away, and kind of ridicule them for being silly. And that's my strategy anyway, is just to kind of laugh at them and to recognize them for being pointless. So the end of that the first 2 week period is the first moment when you're going to start feeling like things are improving. Things are getting better at around 2 weeks. But again, remember what I said about false horizons. The end of that detox period of 2 weeks or so it can be a false horizon, and it comes with risk. And in fact, I would say that the first 3 months are kind of laden with alcoholic landmines. It's a very dangerous period. One of those false horizons is what we've come to call the pink cloud in AA speak. And I'm sure you've heard it, and I'm sure that you're aware that there is no real clinical definition of it, even though I've heard legitimate medical practitioners use the phrase. It doesn't have a clinical definition. And not everybody will experience it. But for those of us who do, it can begin as early as 2 weeks into sobriety, and it can last up to around 6 months or so. In my experience, I've had it, I think, a couple of times. And for me, it didn't really last longer than a month. If you're unfamiliar with it, if it is a new concept to you, the pink cloud is a feeling of kind of nothing as poetic as euphoria, but a kind of energetic contentment. It's called the pink cloud because for a while in early sobriety, you feel like you're floating on clouds. You kind of feel indestructible. You've overcome a massive, massive obstacle. You've climbed a mountain and you're coming down the other side full of kind of reverie and high esteem for yourself. And you're really optimistic about the future and you're very energized. It's this period when sober people start to get gym memberships. Not to knock it. That is a legitimate strategy. I don't mean to demean it or sound cynical or anything, but that's what happens. And look, if it was up to me, I would make the pink cloud period last forever. I would make it not a cloud, I would just make it the normal thing, because the pink cloud's amazing, and you should enjoy it, and you shouldn't feel bad about enjoying it. Don't let cynical, old, bent, kind of AA old-timers make you feel guilty about feeling good in early sobriety. But generally, it does fade. And when it does, that feeling of exuberance about life it can be replaced by a feeling of nihilism and existentialism instead. A kind of feeling of, what's the point? If I'm going to be miserable, I may as well be drunk. That kind of thing. And that's partially because the peak of the pink cloud, this kind of euphoric feeling, for lack of a better word, is so high that the low afterwards is doubly low. The drop can be doubly deep. Everything in sobriety, everything in alcoholism is a kind of trade-off. For feeling good briefly, you will have to feel doubly bad for a little while too. And these are kind of the checks and balances of sobriety. And during this period, regardless of the pink cloud effect, you'll likely be experiencing very vivid and intense dreams and nightmares. And they'll feel so real that you'll often be confused when you wake up. Don't underestimate the importance of those dreams. There's no medical literature I can find about them, but I personally find them to be an incredibly important measure of your sobriety, of where you are on your sobriety journey. Don't underestimate their value to you just because it doesn't feel very scientific to do so. I am not a spiritual person at all, but I do put a lot of stock in the importance of those dreams. That's your body communicating with you. That's your subconscious communicating with your consciousness. And it's a really good way to get insight into where your head's really at, where you're with your sobriety. And jumping ahead again, I started to feel normal once I stopped dreaming about alcohol every night. That was when I turned a corner. I've turned a lot of corners, but that was one of them. Was when those kind of very pervasive, very vivid alcohol-related dreams started to fade away. I still have them occasionally. I had one last night. I only remember a moment of it, but I was putting a bottle of Stolichnaya. And I know it was that because Stoli bottles have a narrow neck, and that was what was in my dream. As I was putting it up to my mouth, a spider crawled out. My subconscious is not very subtle in its metaphors, and I'm grateful for that. I'm happy to see that Stoli went bankrupt last year. Probably because I quit drinking. Okay, so that's the early phases, where there's a couple of little thresholds where you might start to feel better. But where the real differences begin is around 6 months. You'll start feeling better at about 6 months. But it is relative, because at 6 months of sobriety, I also thought that I was feeling good. But looking back now, I recognize that I was still just in the daily grind of sobriety back then. And it's taken this long since for me to actually start feeling good. And I wonder if you ask me in another 5 years, I might look back on this period of like 2 years of sobriety and wonder if I'm still just really struggling, and perhaps I'm not yet anywhere near as good as I will be in the future. That seems pretty likely, doesn't it? But after 6 months, your sleep, another very good indicator of your sobriety, your sleep should hopefully have started to normalize, and you'll be thinking more clearly, and you'll be starting to see some of the actual real-world benefits of sobriety by 6 months. So that's how long it takes to start feeling like you're getting better, in my experience. 6 months is the beginning of getting better, but that's not the same as starting to feel good. So when does that happen? Well, there are two more thresholds after 6 months, I think. The first is after about 1 year of sobriety, and it's pretty commonly reported that 1 year is a major threshold for most people. It was for me. After 1 year, statistically, your risk of relapse is greatly reduced. It's much less likely to relapse once you hit that 1 year milestone. If you can make it to a year, you're in good standing for 2 years, 5 years, 10. But it was my experience that after a year of really hard-earned sobriety, of real struggle, of fighting urges and trying to learn myself a little bit, one of the big factors in that first year was that you will get a better sense of who your real identity is underneath all the alcohol. And that's really important for getting better and being happier, is figuring out who you were underneath it all. And you're probably more financially stable. Most of your health markers will be improved, if not back to normal, back to healthy. A year undoes a lot of damage. So your health is improved and you look noticeably better. You even look better than other people your age who are still drinking. Whatever your age group is, you'll be the best looking one once you quit drinking for a year. And all of those come together eventually. All of them coagulate, as they did for me, to make you feel like you're getting better, to make you start feeling good. Unfortunately though, there are two other factors in the way. So by 1 year sobriety, you will start feeling like you're getting better. But you might have two other things to contend with. And these two things are not commonly discussed outside of recovery communities. One is post-acute withdrawal syndrome, and the other is anhedonia. And there's certainly some overlap between those two things, post-acute withdrawal syndrome and anhedonia. They're kind of interlinked, and it's hard to know where one begins and one ends. But in brief, post-acute withdrawal syndrome is the name given to the kind of emotional and mental part of withdrawal, which comes after the physical part. Again, a little bit like the pink cloud, not everyone gets it. And even fewer tend to know that they've got it until afterwards. You can kind of only see it in retrospect. But I've had it. I had it in this period of sobriety. And it comes with a lot of depression and hopelessness and insomnia. And most of all, it's characterized by brain fog and fatigue. And it can last a very long time. It can last a long time before you even know that you've got it. A lot of people choose to be medicated. If they get diagnosed with it, they might choose medication. And I did for a while. It didn't really work for me. I stopped being medicated ages ago. I recommend speaking to a health professional about it. Don't take my advice. And then there's the anhedonia, which I'm only just emerging from now, really. Nearly two years after quitting drinking. Anhedonia is the inability to experience joy, but it's different from depression. Depression is hopelessness. Anhedonia is a complete lack of interest or joy or pleasure. It's not crippling like depression can be. Depression can stop you from working and that kind of thing. Anhedonia didn't do that for me, but it does last a long time, and it's very confusing, and you feel very lost, and you begin to wonder if this is going to be your permanent state. But emerging from it now I can say truly that I feel good. It's been nearly 2 years since I had my last drink. And only now am I starting to feel good. And perhaps not just good, but better than I was when I started. That is to say, I'm starting to not just feel good, but actually feeling more good than I did before the alcohol was a problem for me. So that's it from me today. To sum up, to recap roughly what I just said, there are several phases when you're going to feel like you're getting better. The very, very first is after the initial alcohol has left your body. So the first week or two of sobriety after you've quit. And the next is going to be after about 6 weeks of sobriety. That's when most people start to experience the pink cloud. And like I said, don't feel bad for feeling good. Don't let cynical, old, sober people like me make you feel bad for feeling good. Just enjoy it while it lasts. Make the most of it. Then another period of feeling like progress is happening is going to be around 3 months, depending on how your experience of the pink cloud goes. And then I think the next period where things start to normalize for you is when the dreaming, the vivid dreams about alcohol stop. Let me know in the comments whether you even experience this, because I'm not sure if I'm out on my own talking about this stuff. But for me, about 9 months after quitting drinking, the dreaming of alcohol stopped as well. And I think that was a major turning point for me. And then at around a year is a major threshold. That's when you'll start to notice that the daily grind of sobriety no longer is a chore for you. You suddenly just you don't have to chip away at it you don't feel like you're pushing a rock up a hill every day. And then after that, once the daily grind of sobriety, once sobriety has stopped being a daily struggle, then you can start to actually feel good at about 1.5 years. So that's it. So subscribe if any of this has been helpful to you, if you see any utility in this kind of content. And if you're willing, go and support the channel on Patreon. Don't worry too much about that. For most of you, nothing is going to change on the channel. And I'm not going to try to guilt you into doing it. No hard feelings if you don't want to support it in that way. That's fine. I completely understand. And nothing on the channel will change for you. But with all of that said, thank you for watching. And as always, good luck out there. Hello, baby. Let's tell them to do the Patreon thing. Tell them to do the Patreon thing. Thanks. Thanks for your help.